Thank you for tuning in to learn about gut health today. This is Mason French with Kevin Rutherford and Dr. Stacy Sims. We've pre-recorded this discussion to get the facts on gut health and how it affects athletic performance. Thank you, Stacy, for joining us online from New Zealand.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And let's play a quick game to get things rolling. Kevin and Stacy have worked together for a while now, and I want to have each of you introduce each other. So Kevin, would you mind introducing Stacy?
I will do that. I will do that. I want to make like a Kiwi joke right now, but I don't have one in my head. So happy almost winter, I guess. Or it is winter for Stacy right now.
It's awfully cold winter. It's awful.
And we're in the midst of a heat wave here in Seattle and actually everywhere in the US for that matter. Well, if I could, let me introduce my pal, friend, and superhuman, Dr. Stacy Sims. Stacy is an exercise physiologist and nutrition scientist, and honestly, I think maybe one of the smartest people I've ever met. So the good news is I get to ask some questions for Stacy, and I get to learn a lot myself, and hopefully that helps everyone else in the audience as well. Oh, I forgot to mention, sorry, Stacy. But Stacy is a really accomplished athlete on the running side, triathlete side, and cycling. So if you have any questions on just competing, she's the one to talk to here as well. All right.
Yeah, but you have to preface I'm a recovering endurance athlete, because now I just have time to do things for fun.
And as far as Kiwi jokes, how about the next flavor of noon? What about that? Would that be a good flavor of noon?
Fijoa. Fijoa. Have you guys ever tried a fijoa?
No. What's that?
What is that?
So I think in the States they call it a pineapple guava.
Ooh, that would be a tasty flavor.
Forget tropical. Out goes tropical. In comes pineapple guava.
Yeah.
What is it?
Fijoa.
Fijoa.
Yeah, fijoa.
Yum. All right, and Stacy, let's have you introduce Kevin.
Kevin. So Kevin, I think, is one of the most down-to-earth, honest CEO type people I've ever met in my life. And we learned a lot about each other when we did the roadshow last year. And I now put him in the whole, not only is he a business colleague, but he's also a really good friend, because you can joke and be sarcastic and laugh, and no one ever takes anybody overly seriously, but then at the same time, you know that he has your back. So he's, again, one of the most honest people in the business, but yet very business savvy. So yeah, I think listen to him more than me for the most part.
All right, let's see if we can complement each other on this this discussion for sure. We got some complementary skill sets. So
yeah, we're off to a roll. So now that we're nice and warmed up, let's just jump into it. What we're discussing today is gut health. We've got a long list of topics to cover and questions to answer. A lot of them are sourced from our Noon ambassadors, so thank you all for giving us a lot of information to consider and questions to ask and topics to cover. So let's just jump in. And Kevin, what do you know about gut health, exercise, and performance?
What do I know about it?
Yeah.
I don't know a lot. I truly don't know a lot. But what I would say is, and we'll use some personal examples in endurance sports for myself and other folks that we've talked to collectively. But I guess the good news is I listened to Stacy enough to the point that I don't have any gut issues. Although,
Nice.
I don't know if I'm fueling appropriately. And so I guess there's a good news, bad news. I don't know if I'm feeding the body, and therefore that relates to the gut appropriately in races. But so that's the bad news. The good news is I rarely have gut issues that I know of. But anyway, let's see if maybe I do have issues. We're going to find out. Well, I probably have issues, but we'll find out about gut specifically. So gut microbiome, what the heck is that, Stacy? What are we talking about? What is a healthy or unhealthy one, whatever this is?
So we say that it's a unique collection of the trillions of microorganisms that are in and around your body. So for the most part, when we're talking about the gut microbiome, it's all the bacteria that exists in your intestines. And they play a huge part in your overall wellness as well as your performance. So if you think about it, if you were to count all the cells in your body, including the microbes, only 43% of your cells are human. The rest are all these little microorganisms. So the American Physiological Society last year declared that the gut microbiome was its own unique organ because it was so influential in so many different systems of the body, including mood, cognition, immune system, endocrine system, sleep patterns, the way that your body weight is controlled, some of your circadian rhythms. So it's a expanding area of research, but something that is very interesting to manipulate.
Fascinating. Seriously fascinating. So if I heard one of your first data points that you call it, did you say 43% of your cells are human? Is that what you said?
Yep.
Wow, that's crazy. I guess that also says that how much influence we can have on our body, right? In good or bad, right? Is a situation here.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's actually build on that. How can we assess our gut health? How do we do that?
So if you want to do it just without having to buy a kit or anything like that, you just kind of find a patterning. So a lot of people say, oh, they're really fatigued and they might have GI distress over certain periods of training, or say someone has a really heavy, like fatty meal, and then the next day, not only do you feel bloated and gassy and you have a little bit of like IBS, that's your gut talking. That's like an unhealthy meal for your gut. So it's the overproduction of bacteria that feed on the fatty acids and produce a byproduct that your body just doesn't like. So there are certain signals, like you know what you're doing. And then other days, you might feel fantastic and on top of the world, and you go out for a run and you don't have any gut problems, and you recover well and you sleep well, and you look at the patterning of what you've been eating, how you fueled before and after, and then that's another indication that you're taking care of your gut. But then you also like listen to media and stuff, and they're saying, hey, have all these probiotic foods, which is fine, but you also have to balance it out with the proper food for the bacteria in your gut. So it becomes kind of not only what are you eating, but also how are you training and how are you recovering? Because the one thing that people don't realize or isn't pointed out is when you start exercising, you have this huge blood flow diversion away from the gut. So now all of that bacteria is under a very hot stress and they have low oxygen, which breeds the growth of the bacteria that loves that environment. And also loves the fact that a simple carbohydrate comes in and that bacteria feeds on it. So if you get this overproduction of the bacteria that feeds on the heat and low oxygen and simple carbohydrate, then that's the status that your gut is always going to want to be in. So when you extract yourself from that status, then you're going to start to have feelings of fatigue and being generally unwell.
I'm thinking as you're talking, because there's a couple areas I wanted to dig in with you today, and that was around how your gut, how it affects or how it's affected by exercise, which you started to tap into. And then there's also then the food and the diet and you know, what's the best thing to do here. So is there a difference? So you talked about already the effect of exercise, generally speaking. Is there a difference when it comes to high intensity exercise, to long distance endurance exercise? Is there a difference in how it affects the gut?
Yeah, there is. And it's not just like what's happening with the gut bacteria. We call it a little bit of epigenetics as well, because there are genetic instructions in the bacteria themselves, because bacteria are living microbes and they have their own DNA. So if you're doing consistent lower intensity, longer endurance exercise, it's a different metabolism aspect that your muscles are using. So the byproducts of the metabolism of your muscle is different from if you were to do something that's really high intense. So those metabolites that are released as byproducts from your exercise will affect the growth of the bacteria that's in your gut, because of blood flow going to the gut and through the muscles, and the fact that you excrete so many different metabolites through the kidney, the liver, and through your intestines. So when you are doing really high intensity exercise, you have a lot of hypoxia and a lot of heat being produced, a lot of lactic acid or buffering agents being produced, then the bacteria will feed on that. And then if you're doing a lot of lower intensity, long, steady state stuff, there's a little bit more blood flow to the gut. You more have a byproduct of fatty acids. So then you're going to have bacteria that feed on the fatty acids start to develop and have an overgrowth of that. And if we look at some of this work that's being done at AIS and at BASIS, they're actually looking and sequencing the gut microbiome of the top elite athletes to see what the sequence and the diversity is in those who are super successful in the high intensity sprint type stuff, those who are super successful in the steady state, so that they can replicate it and perhaps make a probiotic for those who are trying to become up and coming to change the bacteria. It's kind of a weird way of, like, an ergogenic aid, so to speak.
Yeah, weird is right.
Yeah.
When you started talking about the differences when it comes to HIIT and endurance, I was thinking on a personal level, whether I'm doing that high intensity workout or say the half Ironman, which was last weekend in Whistler. And I'm wondering how sport nutrition affects the gut. And as an example, and maybe I'll give you a little bit of context for me, and that'll probably give maybe some color for the audience, because I'm sure they experience something similar. So I use Noon Performance. Thank you for your partnership and everything you did there, of course. That was not meant to be a plug for everyone out there, but I genuinely use the Mango Orange Noon Performance and use it throughout the bike. And then I'm eating a couple of, actually, I probably got in maybe one Cliff Nut Butter bar. And the question that I have that I'm struggling with is, so I don't have a gut issue. I get to the run, I'm fine. I'm fine on the bike, feeling quite great. But I can't really take in much more. I'm really struggling eating solid food. Like in so many ways, I want to take in liquid carbs. I didn't. Don't worry.
Good work.
But I didn't take in a lot of fuel. So, and can you help me and maybe the folks listening, is how does sport nutrition affect gut health? If you go to my situation specifically, what kind of good things am I doing here? What kind of bad things am I not? And I'm not helping myself to perform at my best.
Yeah, so it's multi-layered, so to speak. So if we look at what you're using in training, and I mean, I've talked about this, and there's a Nature article actually out that I can forward if you want to put up for the ambassadors, but it's looking at the training diet of endurance athletes. And those endurance athletes who go out and they use a lot of high sugar, like simple carbohydrate to keep themselves going. Because of the hours of training that endurance athletes put in, their gut microbiome changes to be very similar to that of a sedentary obese American with a SAD diet.
Yeah.
Just because it's feeding on that simple carbohydrate in that heat and hypoxia. So when your body's under a lot of stress, it turns to the fuel that's available. It turns to learn the patterns of that so it can survive under stress. And if you're putting in 2, 3, 4 more hours a day in this stressful situation, it promotes the growth of the bacteria that feeds on the simple carbohydrate in this heat and hypoxia. So you develop the overgrowth of that kind of bacteria, which promotes inflammation. It promotes poor recovery, poor sleeping, immune problems. And so when you start to look at the actual training diet and change it to more real food type aspect, like the nut butter bar or things that have more fat and protein, you don't get this overabundance of the bacteria that feeds on the simple sugar. So how that affects you in training and your recovery is it enhances your fitness adaptation by decreasing inflammation, by boosting the immune system, facilitating your aerobic adaptations. So the overall influence that the bacteria has just basically on the training food that you're eating under the stress is huge on your total adaptation. So if you think about total adaptation and taking that to race day, if you're looking at minimal fueling on race day, it could be a learned response from the bacteria. Like it's used to having fat and protein and carbohydrate and not simple sugar, because you'll have people who do something in training and then they'll switch and they'll go to gels or some Carbo Pro or something, and they just have an awful race from bloating and GI distress, and that can last for days and they don't recover well, and they're like, what did I do? What went wrong with my training? What went wrong with my racing? And again, it comes down to the gut. So when you're talking about not being able to put in a lot and you're under fueling for your race, it's partly you're able to keep going from two aspects. One, your gut's actually helping you along the way from the fact that you're able to recover better and have less inflammation and have better aerobic adaptations from your training. And then when you get to that low fueling aspect and you're using more fatty acids, your body knows what to do with it because it had the ability to use those fatty acids when you were training. So it's a multi-layered effect, but basically if you're taking care of your gut in training, then you can push yourself more in a race situation.
So I have two questions building off that. One, you talked about, it's almost like you can train your gut because the gut starts to mimic what you're taking in when you use the example of a high simple sugar carbohydrate diet, training diet, which you're not recommending, but you use that as an example and you gave the inflammation and all the downsides to it. However, if your gut's used to it, you could actually have a really good race day doing that. Is that true?
Not necessarily, because the thing about race day is different from training.
Yeah.
You have so many different hormonal responses from a nervous response of racing, and the intensity is a little bit higher because you're pushing yourself more. So that can be the tipping point, right? So you're racing or you're training on all the simple sugar, and then on race day, you're trying to still race on that. But it's the tipping point over which your body can actually supercompensate. And that's not necessarily a gut aspect. It's the hormonal responses to the stress. Mm-hmm. So if your body isn't used to dampening cortisol and dampening this hormonal response to stress, which is also influenced by the gut and the diversity of the gut bacteria, then you can end up having like the Ironman slog, the run issues where people are having porta potty stops and decreased pace and the sloshing and the energy fluctuations that's notorious in the longer races.
So when I train, I'm actually very consistent with what I used on race day, is Noon Performance and Cliff Nut Butter bars, honestly.
Cool.
However, I take a little bit more in during training than I did during the race because there's moments on long bike rides where you get to the top of the hill, you take a break, and then I eat a bar and then go again. Like it's a quick break, but it actually allows me to eat. I don't take that break in a race, right?
Yep.
Therefore, I'm really struggling taking it in. Any advice on how to, one, to get over that? And two, should I just say, screw it, it's race day. Give me the sugar. It'll get me to the end. I'm well prepared.
No, don't say that. So, I mean, if you know what the race course is, and bear in mind that, just as you said, you can take little breaks in training, but you can't take them in a race day. So that's part of the race stress, right? It's the increased push. It's the psychological push. It's the increased intensity. All that comes with race day, plus the nerves of race day. Mm-hmm. So if you know what the race course is and know that there's some lull moments on a race course, then this is the opportunity you take to eat a little bit more. So you're kind of not putting yourself on a schedule. You're more attuning your nutrition to what the race course has to offer. So if you know the race course well, and things like Kona, everyone comes down off the hill from Javi and turns back onto the Queen K. And after the first little bump, almost everyone has a downward spiral lull in that bike area, because now all of a sudden they're facing the heat and a headwind and rollers. And it's, maybe 80 miles into it, and they still have the rest of the ride to go. And no one really wants to eat. Their gut's a bit turned off, no food. So this is where you can have something like a peppermint Tums or Mentos, or something that's a little bit of sugar and peppermint just settles the gut, has a cooling effect, and then that just settles the stress response of exercise and can allow you to settle and eat more. So it's more knowing the race course rather than actually being on a schedule.
So that's actually interesting too, because I wasn't doing that. I was trying to take in food every, 15 minutes, which clearly I didn't if I ate less than a Cliff Bar, but yeah.
Yeah. And this is the thing that a lot of people make the mistake of. Every 15 minutes, beep, beep, got to eat, or got to drink. But you can't stop dehydration during exercise. We can only create things like performance and recommend drinking to slow the rate of dehydration. But that heat and hypoxia of the gut changes the way that your body can handle food. So if you're trying to eat and drink the same thing over the course of a half or full Ironman, it's going to sort of backlash, because your intestines and the stress and blood volume all change, as well as your palate. So again, knowing what the race course is and knowing when you can eat, and then changing up a little bit when there might be a lull or ability to pass. So this is where you can tailor your nutrition not only to the length, but also the terrain, which gives you more success instead of just eating the same thing on the schedule.
What about running? Running sucks when you're eating.
I know it does. I know it does. And it's easier in an Olympic and a half than it is in a full.
How about the folks just running a marathon? How about them?
Oh, yeah. Just running a marathon is easier than off the bike, of course.
Oh, okay.
So if you go in well-fueled, then you can exist on just glucose, or on the course of a marathon, you go in well-fueled, you're looking at a 3 to 4 hour marathon for the general pop, and you can get by on glucose tablets and chews, or Mentos, some little quick hits of sugar for that duration. And I know that goes against what I'm saying about helping the gut, but in that situation, you're not getting as stressed and dehydrated as you would in a triathlon, marathon, or half marathon.
Okay, gotcha. Yep, that makes sense.
And because you're well fueled going in and using taper week to top up your prebiotics, your probiotics, your immune system, all your electrolytes, that 3 to 4 hours of race stress isn't enough to do as much damage to the gut as a half Ironman or a full Ironman.
So one of the things when you and I have talked in the past of having some protein in, that's what the benefit was in the nut butter bar, using as an example. Cliff, you're welcome for all these plugs for you. So, how do carbs, protein, and fats affect the gut differently? You talked a little bit about it before, but maybe you can break that one down for us. Because here's part of why I'm asking that as well. Is protein in the past I've heard is you don't want to have protein while you're in exercise. You do post for recovery, but you don't want to have it during exercise because I heard the quote, burns dirty. So whether or not that's true or not, but that's kind of what I heard. So carbs, protein, fats, how does it affect the gut differently? Can you help us understand that?
Yeah, so we'll start with you ingest it, it's in your stomach. And fat helps protein, that helps carbohydrate. They all help each other digest and titrate out of the stomach into the small intestines. So what happens when it gets into the small intestines, you don't want an overload of any one macronutrient, because it'll overload the ability for digestion and absorption. So if you're having small amounts of protein, fat, and carbohydrate, they all help each other with the digestive and absorption process, not only through the metabolic system and transport mechanisms, but also for the fact that you're not going to overload the gut with any one macronutrient. And when you're talking about protein burning dirty, it's kind of a misnomer, because if you're having protein before and some during and definitely after, it increases the amount of amino acids circulating. So if you have a higher amount of amino acids circulating, it helps counter cortisol. And we know that cortisol is the main like body fat production storage hormone. It also is significantly catabolic, breaks everything down. So with a higher level of amino acids circulating, it reduces that exercise stress. So again, you can push yourself a little bit harder without overextending that stress situation.
Okay. Couple more, just building on what we're putting in our bodies and some of the things we're hearing that's really good for us. And you talked a little bit about probiotics a little while ago.
Mm-hmm.
Do probiotics help your gut? Like truly, is there even a difference? Is it all a myth? I'm thinking like kombucha. Should I be doing that or not doing that? And then after that, then I was going to go, how about prebiotics? And what the heck is that? What's the difference?
Yeah, so probiotics is actually the bacteria you want to ingest to help diversify the bacteria that's in your gut. So if you're drinking and eating probiotic foods like miso, tempeh, kombucha, sauerkraut, yogurt, kefir, all of those fermented foods, they have a variety of bacteria that causes the fermentation. And when you're ingesting it, it increases the diversity in your gut itself. Prebiotics is a food for that bacteria that's already in your gut. So if you're looking at the types of food that you're eating to, again, increase the diversity, because the more diverse the bacteria, the better you are off in a wellness situation. Because you have the overgrowth of any one particular microbe, then it can offshoot the health status. So if we're looking at prebiotics, you're looking at high fiber type foods that the bacteria take a while to break down. So if you're taking in inulin, then it allows a certain bacteria to grow that exists primarily on complex carbohydrates. And why we want that is it decreases inflammation, it decreases your oxidative stress. So all the things that we want when we're talking about taking a vitamin or taking an antioxidant, if you're eating foods that promote the growth of bacteria, then you don't need those supplements.
And what foods will we find inulin in?
So your Jerusalem artichokes, some of your green bananas, so not overripe bananas, but your low sugar bananas, and your leafy greens as well. So it's kind of the stocky, hard to digest or hard to chew kind of foods, but you can cook them as well to make them a bit softer, just as long as you get them in.
Yeah. How about hydration? Imagine that. We're going to talk about hydration for a second here.
Awesome.
What's hydration's role when it comes to gut health?
Blood volume and circulation, right? Because if you think about the way things are delivered to the intestines, to the muscles, and taken away, it's all through blood and the fluids that exist in the blood. And all processes in the body for cellular transportation across cell membranes, around cell membranes, all the physiological processes that happen in the body all require water. And the bulking of the large intestines with your fiber, and you also need water for that bulking agent. So if you are not hydrated, then you're not going to promote the health of the intestines. You're not going to promote the blood circulation you need for the transportation of nutrients to and from. Someone put it where if you're looking for the best ergogenic aid possible, it's hydration.
Have you ever had a gut issue?
Yeah. I have.
How could that be true?
Because we all start somewhere, right? We all start somewhere and learn, or start somewhere and then get the bug, so to speak, to figure out what's going on.
So on that note, how can we optimize our gut for health and performance? Like, what advice or tips do you have, knowing that you've gone through the journey?
Yeah. And it all comes down to like your general nutrition, right? What are you doing from a general standpoint? It's that wide variety of different types of fruits and veg, whole grains, just your basic grandma type recipe of eating things that you can identify, no processed foods, because there's so many research projects and studies going on that show that the processed foods that have your preservatives and your artificial colors and artificial sugars or sugar substitutes promote the growth of bacteria that causes inflammation and immune dysfunction. So it's eating low on the food chain, not taking probiotic pills because we don't actually know the long-term effect of probiotic pills. Get your probiotics from food, your prebiotics from food, your training diet, watch what you're doing for your training diet as well. And all of that's going to facilitate your adaptations you're trying to get in training, which in turn facilitates better performance.
So you touched on something when you talk about training. So can you help us on this one? Can you actually optimize your gut for both health and performance? Or is there a trade-off? Because performance, like, there's stress that we're putting on that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you're experiencing that stress almost every day you go training. So if you're supporting the body in that stress, because the reason we go training is to break the body down to a certain point and rebuild it. And it's the rebuild or the recovery that we want, because that's what promotes your adaptations for performance. So if your body is under stress through training, if you're supporting it through that stress and recovering optimally, then you're going to get faster fitness adaptations, which means better performance on race day.
I like it. I'm ready to race. I want to go. I want to race right now. So
Sweet.
How about resetting your gut?
Oh, yeah.
How do you do that? Is like in general, or maybe it's even after an illness, or maybe it's after a race. How do you reset the gut?
So one of the best things that you can do after an illness or after a lot of GI distress through race is using this stuff called lactulose. So lactulose is over-the-counter, don't laugh when I say this, but over-the-counter laxative syrup that is often used in pediatric, for kids and that kind of stuff. And if you use it in the recommended doses of 45 mils, which is about 3 tablespoons, you're going to end up with a laxative effect. If you take 1 teaspoon, that is a powerful prebiotic that helps reset the gut.
Huh.
So when I have athletes who come in and they've had lots of GI distress from traveling and jet lag, and then they have a race situation and they can't eat, they feel bloated, then I have them do a course of lactulose and nothing but like really good organic fruit and veg for the prebiotics. So you get this big boost of powerful prebiotics to help with gut diversity. And I know I get a little bit of crap about telling them not to wash their fruit and veg if it's organic, because you also want the dirt, because the dirt also increases the diversity of the gut microbiome.
But make sure it's organic is your point on that.
Yeah.
Right?
So you're not taking in pesticides and things you don't want.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting, right? Because, sorry, I'm going on a tangent here, but I'm thinking fruit, veggies in a grocery store, how many people are mauling their hands all over it? So I'm
thinking farmer's market.
I like how you think. Well, there's still hands being mauled all over it, but that's a whole other conversation. But
yeah, I know. But I mean, part of the reason why we have an upsurge of allergies in kids is because of this huge, like, we have to wash everything. We can't let them play in the dirt. So they're not experiencing a wide variety and diversity of the gut microbiome to help with your immune system. So if you're looking for ways to increase the diversity quickly and you're not going to a new place, then that is one of the best ways. Even though hands are mulling all over it, right? Then that's giving you bacteria from so many different parts of the city.
Yep. Very fair.
A little
So,
bit disgusting when you think about it, but when you're thinking about gut health and you're trying to reset it, you want a lot of diversity. Yeah.
so speaking of the opposite of that, antibiotics, if you're getting prescribed those, they're killing a lot of things in your body, probably sometimes much needed. But that's got to wreak havoc on your gut, no?
Yes, it does. It's awful. And sometimes the side effects of that is a C. diff or C. difficile infection that people get. And then that can't be killed with another course of antibiotics. So not trying to reset the gut while you're on a course of antibiotics. Go through the antibiotics, taking an iron supplement with it, because antibiotics also really do damage to red cell and oxygen carrying capacity. So as an endurance athlete, you don't want that. And then afterwards, reset your gut with your lactulose and your prebiotic foods.
Got to check out this lactulose.
Yeah.
I've not heard of this. I think that's what I have. Mason, did you have some questions here?
Yeah, totally. It is also interesting to learn that we want dirt on our foods. So organic dirt.
Yeah.
Go ahead, get organically dirty.
Yeah.
All right, so we have some questions that we'll run through. I also had some questions that I want to hit just real quick that popped up in my head while we were going through this. We were just talking about food. So I was wondering if you could give us maybe some tips on top food benefiting the gut, benefiting performance in an ideal world before race, during race, after race.
So how far before race? Like right before or leading up to it?
I would say let's do week of, and then timing before race and the type of food.
So your taper week is the week that you want to top up everything. So this is where, again, you're eating your wide variety of fruit and veg and whole grains, trying to diversify and strengthen the gut bacteria, as well as contributing to total body water and electrolytes and magnesium and all those kinds of things. So you're looking at a really good, solid, non-processed food diet during taper week. And people are like, oh, well, taper week, I'm craving sugar. It's because you're recovering a bit and your body's wanting more carbohydrate. But if there's any time to be spot on in your whole food nutrition, it's taper week, because it's not only protecting the gut, but it's also topping up on all of those electrolytes that you're going to need on race day. The day before the race is the most important day. So if you're racing on Saturday, Thursday is the most important day to really pay attention to hydration, to sleep, to your diet, and that kind of stuff. The day before, Friday, is more of topping up everything. So again, you're not topping up with processed foods and simple sugars, but looking for real food. And then on race day, it comes down to what's the duration. So give me, what duration do you want me to talk through?
Let's do half Ironman, because I have some follow-up questions about half Ironman and Ironman as well.
Okay. So with a half Ironman, you have to think about fueling for the swim and then getting on the bike, right? So you're not going to be doing anything that's going to cause you your own personal GI problems. So some people can handle a real meal of like scrambled eggs on toast before, but other people can't. So they're looking for protein shakes, or they're looking for, a banana with peanut butter, or something that they can handle. Some people can only do like overnight oats, or they blend up oats with almond milk to have more of a slurry, so it's easier to drink. So the morning is topping up the glycogen stores and preparing you. When you're looking on the course for food for a half Ironman, on the bike, you're spot on with your hydration, and you're looking for real food. So is it Cliff Nut bars? Is it little white bread sandwiches with some nut butter? Is it homemade protein bites? Whatever you've been using in training, that's a mix of fat, carbohydrate, and protein that's going to keep you going. Then when you get to the run, this is more topping up on hydration and maintaining blood sugar. So you can look to use some chews, you can look to use some glucose tablets, and it's only an hour and a half to 2 hours of that stress where you're fueling on small amounts of sugar that's being absorbed quickly. If you're using glucose tablets, it doesn't even affect the gut because it's being absorbed through the mouth to increase blood sugar quickly. And you carry yourself through that way. And then post-exercise or post-training, this is where you want to get that protein in. So it can be, your go-to quick chocolate milk. It can be something like a vegan smoothie where you're using vegan protein powder and then using the water from the race course itself, or the recovery finishing tent where you're just getting some quick watery protein in to facilitate bringing cortisol down, cooling the intestines, just setting your metabolism at a lower set point so that your body can start to relax, and then have real food a couple of hours later. And again, the real food is, what do you want your body to rebuild itself on? You're not wanting your body to rebuild itself on beer and pizza, even though you might really want that. But think first, let's get some real food in so the body's rebuilding, and then you can go out for your beer and pizza.
Oops.
I messed that one up. And then a lot of athletes will feel kind of maybe run down or hungry just for the next week or
Yeah.
a few days after. What's going on there?
So you've put yourself through all of this training and leading up to race day, and you've kind of, it's a bit of a psychological as well as a physiological aspect, right? So you're building up, and it's a lot of stress. Boom, race day comes, high stress, and then you're done with that. And you have this huge amount of stress release. And when your stress levels come down, this is when your body starts to relax, and part of that relaxation is recovery. So your immune system is kind of kicked into overdrive, and you start to feel run down and sick because it's trying to take care of everything it didn't let you beforehand. Plus, when you have that high stress, you're traveling, you're racing, and you have severe immune depression right after that, you tend to pick up a few things. You're also low sleep. You're also in this elevated recovery state. So your muscles and are kind of in overdrive trying to repair and recover the glycogen. And you're feeling a bit flat because you've just done this massive effort. So it's normal, just like taper week sickness is normal because your body's starting to come down. And it's, how do you attenuate that? How do you stop yourself from getting sick? And it's, take care of the foods that you're eating to boost your immune system through your gut and the, micronutrients that are circulating through the body to help with the immune system.
Stacy, quick question for you.
Yeah.
One thing we didn't talk about, which might come up with Mason, I'm not sure, but how about salt tabs? Yeah, what do you, I'm a salty sweater. Does it affect my gut or not?
Yeah. So the thing about salty sweat, it's not indicative of what your body actually needs. So if you are a salty sweater, it could be that you've had a high salt diet during taper week, or you've had a lot of miso soup as a preload or something to that effect. So it's primarily diet driven. It's also an indication of environment. So if I were to all of a sudden go to the east coast of the US where it's blazing hot from New Zealand and I go out for a run, I'm not used to that. So I'm going to have a lot of salt in my sweat because my body's going to try to hold on to the water because I'm not used to that heat. So it's an environmental factor of your body trying to conserve water and excrete other things that could inhibit performance. It's also a factor of how fit you are. The fitter you are, the more dilute your sweat is. And, some people just excrete more sodium than others. And women in particular, you end up with saltier sweat in the high hormone phase than the low hormone phase. It's just a functionality of how the hormones work and how aldosterone works. Is it an indication you need salt tablets? No. Why has salt tablets gotten such a big push, especially in endurance sport? it has to do with the fact that people think that salt prevents cramping, but it doesn't. And it's the same thing. If you're going to take in a salt tablet into a dehydrated gut that doesn't have a lot of blood flow, it doesn't have a lot of water from the blood going to it, then it's going to cause this pressure response where it's going to draw water from all the other places it can to bring into the stomach in order to do something with that concentrated sodium. If you're hyponatremic, or borderline hyponatremic, then there's a time and a place for high salt, but salt tablets in themselves are not the answer. The other aspect about a salt tablet is that primarily sodium chloride, and you have a 10-fold decrease in your body's ability to absorb chloride during exercise. So then you have this extra chloride hanging out that opens up your intestinal cells and causes more endotoxin release and GI distress. That's me on a soapbox about salt tablets.
I was just curious. I had a question. I was post-race swim this week. I was actually in Minneapolis swimming in Cedar Lake for any people from Minneapolis, and there was someone there that was actually at Whistler, and she was telling me about salt tabs, and I'm like, oh boy, I don't know if that's a good call, but okay.
Give them to your competitors.
I gotta start handing them out next race, and at least I got a shot.
There you go.
So we've got just some questions that I'll list off as kind of like rapid fire. We'll just get through them real quick. And the first one is, how do juice cleanses affect gut health? Just that kind of fad.
Yeah.
Question.
So I'm not a fan of cleanse because of the fact that you have two organs that are responsible for cleansing the body all the time. It's your kidney and your liver. So a juice cleanse is the same thing as a juice fast. All you're doing is taking in juice. And if you're doing a smoothie where you're blending up all the fiber, then it's not so bad. But if you're doing straight juice, all it is straight sugar into the gut. And the fact that people are doing juice cleanses, it's usually not a wide variety of different fruits and veg. So you're reducing the diversity of the bacteria in your gut. It takes 7 days to change it or less.
Wow. And then the next question here that we received was, are ulcers and gut health related?
Not necessarily.
Okay. And then this goes on to a more general question. How does gut health impact other body systems, cardio, neuro, etc.?
It plays a significant role. So, I mean, there's now a whole area of biomedical research looking at bacteria in the gut that can either turn on or off cancer cells. There's, cardiovascular responses as well. So it's a combination of the genetic makeup of the bacteria as well as your own genetic makeup, and they can under and overexpress each other. So there's a huge tie-in to every system in the body and the gut health. And this is why it's such a wide open area of new science.
Exciting. The new frontier.
The new frontier.
So you mentioned hydration on gut health. Did you say that was like one of the very, very important things? I might have missed that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So drink noon, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. not so shameless plug. So we had a question about fiber, and we've covered fiber a bit. Do you need a lot of fiber for gut health? And should athletes cut fiber leading into races? Ooh, there you go.
So, I mean, there's a mixed conversation about fiber leading up to race day. And when you start to look at the reasons why people want to cut fibers, because they end up with diarrhea or GI distress. But when you specifically look at what they're eating and drinking on race day, that's the primary reason for the GI distress and the diarrhea. So it's more of a backtracking. It's if you're having a high fiber diet and you're increasing the diversity of the bacteria, then when you get to race day, you're not going to have an issue, especially if you're paying attention to race day foods.
And when maintaining your diet while training, does your, like fiber is of course very important to your gut health. Does it need to be exceedingly high, low? Does it depend on the person?
It doesn't have to be exceedingly high, no. I mean, there are dietary fiber recommendations put out, but that's because most of those recommendations are geared for the standard American diet that's really low in fiber and high processed foods. If we're talking about an athlete who's trying to take care of themselves and is going more in the direction of whole foods, they're going to hit their fiber needs, no problem.
That's interesting. Like when you talk about high fiber and diet, Stacy, I don't actually think my diet changes much at all. Like it actually, I don't think it deviates very much. Seriously, like even during high training weeks, like where you're hitting your peak periods, I don't know if that's a good thing. I feel like and I'm not talking about in training, obviously, like the longer you're there on the bike training and running, the more fuel you're going to take in. But overall, I think I eat the same stuff. Is that good? I think there could be downside to that actually.
Yeah, because again, you're not increasing diversity or optimizing what that gut bacteria can do for you. The other thing, and this is a deviation away from gut health, but back into our low energy availability, right? So there's so many studies coming about the prevalence of low energy availability, and a lot of it has to do with sudden upticks in training and racing, which mutes the appetite. So people really aren't taking in as much as they should for the extra expenditure. So when you get into low energy availability, then this also affects immunity, affects bone health, endocrine function, and the tie between the gut microbiome and low energy availability is an area of new research as well.
Mm-hmm. We should definitely do a talk with Stacy again soon, just specifically on energy availability.
I agree.
Yeah.
That one is really interesting to me.
Oh, who doesn't want more energy?
I know.
That's a good
Who doesn't
point.
want the quick fix?
There is a quick fix, right?
There is a quick fix. Yeah, there is for sure.
There's a
Teaser for
teaser.
next time. Yeah.
Yeah, don't give it away now.
Yeah. Schedule me in, kids. Schedule me in.
That's exciting. In general, it sounds like nothing new on race day. That's like a big message from today is find something like diversify your diet, make it whole food based, get your gut just like steady without any irregularities, and then don't try anything new on your race.
On race day. Yeah. I laugh because the biggest offenders of that are people who are racing Kona. They go to the expo and you have some kind of new product and like, oh, fantastic, I'm going to use it tomorrow. And you're like, race day's tomorrow. Yeah, I don't know, but I'm going to use it. Really?
I'm with you. I'm with you on this one. So a little story for you. I was in Whistler and talking to a friend of mine from BC, and I was asking about his nutrition for the race, and he was talking about it, and then he asked me, knowing obviously I'm with Noon, and he indicated he used Noon for his training, but he was just going to use what was on course, which was Gatorade, which was fine, like I guess. And I just said to him, I go, listen, you don't have to tell me you're using Noon just to make me feel good. If you were using Gatorade in training, if you were, I said, you don't have to answer that. Don't change today. This is not the time to change. I'm like, use whatever you've been doing. Now is not the time to switch.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
I'm with you, whether it's Kona or Boston Marathon, New York City Marathon. It's like people asking you these questions and you can give them some advice, but at the same time, I'm so quick to say, please don't take Noon if you haven't been doing it for race day. Don't do that now.
Right. Don't change it.
Not now.
Yeah.
After, let's talk about changing this. Let's
exactly.
Let's up your performance. But
exactly.
Now's not the time to start playing with your gut and changing things around.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good point. And if for example, someone after listening to this was curious about switching up some stuff in their diet, including some more whole foods, fruits and vegetables, and fiber, how long would you recommend they start easing into it, adding that in, is it 2 weeks, or not from events, but just in general? And then is there a window where you should say maybe 2 weeks out from a race, even don't start experimenting and just wait for the next training cycle, that kind of thing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, like it's a slow change, because slow change is the best change. And like I said, it's 4 to 7 days you can completely change your bacteria makeup. But yeah, 2 weeks out from a major race, you don't really want to be changing things up, because you're stressed, you're focusing on taper, your body's already just on the edge of like breaking, so to speak. Doesn't matter if have the best coach in the world, everybody goes to that point, and you just don't want to tip yourself over. Wait till after racing.
Now you tell me. I think I tipped.
We all experience it, Kevin.
Just you're getting it out of the way for next time.
That's right.
Sure.
When you come down and do Rockman in January.
January.
Yeah.
All right.
I think have I sent that to you? Rockman?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. You have to do it.
What is
local.
Rockman?
So Rockman is the new swim run format. I think Brecca is the more well-known name, and Rockman is its rival. But you swim in your running shoes and wetsuit, and you run in your wetsuit with your swim buoy, and it's swim run, swim run, swim run. And it can be anywhere from 3 to 7 hours, depending on the race. But
or if you're me, 7 to 20 hours.
No, not if you came and did the local one here, because then it brings you to the best of the best, and it'd be 2 hours.
Yeah,
do the short course.
Some good practice.
You're right.
Yeah.
Just throw you right into the wolves.
Or the sharks.
Or the sharks. That's the phrase.
Nope. No sharks.
Good. Well, that's awesome. Well, I think that covers everything for today. I think I learned a lot. Kevin, did you?
Oh, for sure. I always do. Every time I talk to Stacy.
Me too. And I'm really excited to continue to be able to ask you these types of questions. And then, yeah, that low energy availability, that could be a really fun one that we're stay tuned.
Yeah.
But yeah, as always, thank you for your expertise and your knowledge on the topics. If you and Kevin have anything else to add, this would be the time too.
Stacy, any plugs?
No, not really. The only thing I have to say is, if anyone is interested in doing like your gut microbiome analysis, there's so many different kits and things out there because it's such a hot topic.
Oh.
But Ubiome is a really, I mean, they're using the proper techniques for analysis, and it's not just a marketing ploy to make money, which is the problem with so many over-the-counter kits. So you can look up Ubiome, and not only are they really spot on with the scientific aspect of analysis, but they're also contributing to a really large international data set to really understand what's going on with the gut microbiome.
Very cool. And so what you do is they give you do some sort of sample data analysis, and then what?
And then they send you the results and tell you like where you are against the general population, if you're low diversity or high diversity, or just in the middle, and how that affects your health.
Very cool.
So if you go to the website, they have different PDFs you can download to see what an analysis would look like, and it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, sounds awesome.
Might give it a try.
I would say one last comment, if I could, Mason. I would say this is, there's a lot of information out there, folks, and, this is a big brain here, being Dr. Stacy Sims. So definitely hear her out. Top sports scientist on the planet. This is someone you want to listen to and read about. So.
Oh, thanks, Kevin. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, you got it. So thanks for joining us today. And thanks for everyone tuning in to the recording. And if you have any follow-up questions, you can post those through social media or email. And keep on living the Noon life out there, and stay hydrated.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks.